Today is March 12th, 2025. I'm on 2 Linden Place. We're doing a sewer camera inspection. We'll be using a copper and cast iron waste drainage pipe located near the front foundation wall. And the report is as follows. All right, so the camera has gone down and under the floor through a 90-degree bend, and now we're running as a horizontal pipe underneath the floor of the basement. This is still cast iron piping at this point. As we head forward, you can see here there's some hairs hanging out inside the pipe. That is going to be root infiltration into the pipe. We do have some large trees here around the foundation of the house, so that is not terribly concerning for me. However, it may lead to a need for cleaning. Let's back up here for just a second. So as I sit here at this intersection point here, you can see that we're going to see some standing water in front of us, but if you look off in the distance, that's about 3 to 4 feet away from us. You can see there's a large mass of roots there on the left-hand side. I also suspect that those roots are probably growing along the bottom edge of this pipe too, and it's contributing to, well, right there is some of it, to some of this kind of pent-up water inside the pipe. So under normal flowing circumstances, your sewer line should be self-relieving, meaning that once you flush a toilet, gravity kind of gets things moving quickly and efficiently away from the house. And then from that point, we should see a pipe when I'm not running water, which I am not any longer. And you can see the water is real still and stagnant. That the water should be able to relieve itself as it goes out. When we find ourselves in a situation where the pipe is full of water, like we're seeing here, that's usually a symptom of one of two issues. One is we have some type of a clog that's acting as a dam, and that is causing for the water to get stuck. Or option 2 is improper pitch. And that means like basically the pipe's going uphill, and so water doesn't want to fight to go back up that hill. So in this case, our answer is its roots. And these roots are kind of unchecked at this point. So they've become large and gotten into the pipe. And now, like I said, they're acting like dams. So we've actually changed material types in the midst of all this. I know that was hard to see, but before we were in cast iron, now we're in terracotta clay pipe. And clay pipe is typically the culprit, if you will, when we talk about root infiltration. So let me come up here on this joint. So you'll see here there's a seam inside the pipe. Now this seam has just a tiny, tiny bit of roots coming through it, but the thing you need to understand is that, well, clay pipe's a masonry product, and so we're putting it in the ground, and the ground is never stationary. It's always kind of rising or falling. And so if we made this pipe super rigid and the pipe started to move, or the ground started to move around the pipe, then we would end up with a crack or broken pipe. So to combat that, when they installed these, every 3 feet, they integrated a seam in the pipe. And that seam kind of looks like an oversized bell-shaped fitting and a straight cut pipe that slides into it, very similar to what you see in modern plumbing today. But the catch is that seam is not sealed, leaded, threaded. It's a very loosely fitting joint. And so the downfall of that is that it allows for the pipe to move, which we want, but it allows water to exit the pipe. And so as water exits the pipe, you've got trees nearby that seek out that water, and then those tree roots find their way into the pipe. And that is kind of the progression of everyone that has any type of tree or large vegetation in their yard, and how that happens. So here's a great example. Like, this isn't as acute as some of the other places I've showed you so far where it's holding up water, but this is a great representation that I haven't been able to give you so far. So what does this tell us so far? Well, so far, I haven't seen anything physically wrong with the pipe, which is good. But we know that the pipe is not flowing as it's intended to. Debris and water is getting stuck inside the pipe, and that is a problem. As continued situations of using the house goes on, we're going to find ourselves in a situation where maybe the wrong thing at the right time goes down the drain, and that'll cause a clog and a potential backup into the basement. So we don't want that to happen. So if I'm limiting your liability, my comment is, hey, this pipe needs to be cleaned out. So then we're going to change our tone as long as we don't see anything else here. We need to talk about cleanings. So cleanings come in a couple different forms, but primarily I'm going to talk about augering and or hydrojetting. I'm going to run some water here too. So augering, that's kind of the old school method of cleaning a pipe. Basically, the idea is that it's a metal head. It's kind of haphazardly bouncing around inside this pipe, and it's ripping and tearing at these roots, trying to chunk them out. Downfall of this, of course, is that we've got a fragile clay pipe, and it is very haphazard in the way it works. And so there is a risk associated with, damaging the pipe when you use an auger. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee by any means, but there's a risk, no doubt. If I'm being fair, there's a risk with every pipe and every foreign object we put inside of a pipe because, that's just not what it was intended for. But the second option being hydrojetting, think of this like a pressure washer made for the inside of your pipe. It's much more gentle on the pipe, but also it's intense enough that it can cut and sever the roots and the debris that's built up inside the pipe, which is what we're after. It's much less severe on the pipe. And the other thing that I always point out to people is that it does a much more thorough job. So it's the analogy I use is, let's say you had some mud on your driveway and you wanted to get that off. Well, would you like to use a rake or would you like to use the pressure washer? Well, the answer is pretty clear. The pressure washer is going to just do a much more thorough job of removing the contaminants from the pipe and just leave us with a better looking pipe at the end, which also means that the next time you have to do this should theoretically be further off in the future because you got more of it the first time. That's the last conversation. So because we're seeing roots inside the pipe, there's options that can be out there to prevent that from happening. One of those is preventative maintenance with chemicals. The other is the sewer liner, but that gets very expensive. Typically I tell people to hold off on doing something like that unless the roots are really severe or there's actual physical damage to the pipe, which we haven't seen. But your expectation here is that whether you're dosing chemicals, periodically cleaning out this pipe, or making an investment at some point into a sewer liner, this sewer line is going to progressively have needs. So be aware of that. I usually tell people if you're just doing the cleaning process, every 3 to 5 years is a pretty normal time frame for people. But of course, I can't control the roots, so you're going to have to kind of adjust that time frame as needed to go from there. So let me see if I can get this camera to bump along here some more. So you're seeing here that we have less and less roots. That's because the roots are up here close to the house. And now we're pushing further away from the house. And therefore we're getting further and further away from the trees and root growth. So, all right, and right ahead of us here, this is the city sewer tap at about 74 feet. The sewer lateral here at the end of the cul-de-sac is made out of brick, if you're asking yourself. That is pretty typical for this age frame. So the good news is, after all this conversation, all we really need is just a good solid cleaning. The pipe is pretty average and typical to what I expected to see. The physical condition of the pipe looks to be in good shape. And so doing some preventative cleanings and some dosing of chemicals, that's where I'm at for you right now. You can continue to look into other options depending on how long you want to stay at the house with the sewer liners and things of that nature. But again, the cost is kind of prohibitive to make that worth the while in most cases. So I'll call this one done.